Who knows the 401? Okay. Have you ever seen anyone drive 100 on the 401? Okay, keep your hands up until you're uncomfortable with this statement. I will not get a ticket at 105 on the 401. See your hands. I will not get a ticket at 110. Could you get a ticket? Could you be above one odor unit? I will not get a speeding ticket at 120. I will not get a speeding ticket at 140. Okay, so we know where the boundaries are, okay? We know the easy stuff, okay? No odor, that's easy. Really bad odor, that's easy, okay? That 105 to 125 zone is the difficult part. You could get a ticket, okay? You could get pulled over at 114 and the guy beside you is going 130. But you still could get a ticket. So this is where the subjectivity and the qualitative approach of odor regulation comes into play. Okay, that officer just might not like the look of your bumper. I meant on your car. I heard it. Okay, let's go. Okay, we need good synergies between our residential communities and the economic viability of our industrial agricultural communities. That's why we need good odor regulations. Both of those sides of the coin need to be able to understand what they're entitled to, okay? Where they're going to get that speeding ticket and what you can expect as a resident of a neighborhood to enjoy your property. We need well-defined approaches in determining when there are odor issues and odor problems. Okay, these have to be consistent. Okay. Industry cares not because of these fines. Okay, these are nominal numbers I have up here. These are publicly available. You dig up a few. Who's been fined? Okay, these are nominal values. This isn't what industry is most worried about. They're most worried about operation limitations, okay? Constraints to their business, not being allowed to use certain chemistry in certain hours or wind conditions. Those are much more damning to a business than these nominal fines. These fines are a public slap, okay? Now there are a variety of odor regulations, and I'm going to go through them. They all work together. Okay? It's not that one jurisdiction has one type of odor approach versus another. They basically have a number of odor approaches and they work together. Almost all jurisdictions have a general prohibition. Okay? Thou shalt not commit odor. Okay, that's a general prohibition. They're generally enforced when there's loss of enjoyment of property. Okay, that's the teeth of this type of regulation. And that's where the subjectivity comes into play. Okay? Florida's Department of Environmental Protection, they have almost the most concise language. If you ever look at this language in any jurisdiction, it's pages and pages. Florida's got it pretty tight, so that's why I like it. No person shall cause, okay? Thou shalt not commit odor, okay? Which is cause or contribute to an objectionable odor, okay? There's the subjectivity component. It's an objectionable odor. I think that perfume's objectionable on that man. Okay? So that's my interpretation. Some other people might like it. So even in the hard language, there's subjectivity. New Brunswick has all kinds of subjectivity, okay? It's got all the no person shall language again, and then substantially interfere with down at the bottom. Normal is another subjective word. Substantial loss of the normal enjoyment of property. You're not enjoying your property normally. So it's awkward language to enforce if the rules and the application of these rules aren't consistent. The UK is pretty concise. But then if you look at the second bullet there, where they define nuisance, okay, thou shalt not cause a nuisance, they have 2 more sections that go on to define what a nuisance is. Okay, so this isn't easy. Even in the most blanket case of do not commit odor, there's all of these subtle little lines in there that make it difficult. Bottom line, most jurisdictions have some form of general prohibition. These regs can be difficult to enforce because there's a subjective component to them all. The really only ability to win a case in this is if there's decent case law with a track record and some other cases that have gone before it, okay? So when you are in front of the OMB and they haven't seen the case, they have, by the way, they're going to fall back on what they determine normal enjoyment of your property is. That general prohibition and nuisance clauses are often combined with other types of regulatory approaches. One of them is an ambient concentration of chemical constituents. Now, we heard a couple great presentations today on how those numbers are being evolved and refined and developed using certain segments of trained noses, et cetera, et cetera. These modeled concentrations can then be used in a modeling scenario. Okay? So for example, in Ontario, there's 31 chemicals listed that are pegged to an odor threshold. Okay? It's easy for you to evaluate your in-stack concentration. You run a little dispersion model and you can compare your chemical constituent. Connecticut's got a dozen. Again, they've all got different averaging periods. Okay? The consistency isn't exact, but the approach is similar in many jurisdictions. Japan and Korea, and there's a spider. Okay. Even when you pick a singular hydrogen sulfide, all these jurisdictions have a hydrogen sulfide number. There's a pretty significant swing in what those numbers are. You look at California, Japan, and South Korea, they're quite friendly to hydrogen sulfide versus Quebec, Ontario. So even when you have a perceived odor threshold, a published paper, peer-reviewed, latest and greatest, it can be adopted and interpreted in many different ways. So many jurisdictions have ambient concentration limits. They vary significantly. It's a great approach to identify a compound that potentially is causing an off-site odor. It does not preclude you from getting an odor complaint, nor does it take into account the mixture of airborne contaminants or your neighbor's airborne contaminants and any synergistic effects from those. So again, there's certainly some benefit, but again, it's not a standalone item. Setback distances, we had a terrific presentation earlier on buffer zones and MDS from, I apologize for forgetting your name, 3 speakers ago. Primarily used at the planning level. It's very difficult to adopt setback distances in an established community. It's too late. Okay. You can roll them out onto a redevelopment if there's a new zone or a new agriculture coming in. They're most often utilized with agriculture. OMAFRA's done a lot of work on it, but they are adopting them and using them in other known odiferous type of facilities with very consistent odor generations, landfills, composting, waste management, etc. I won't go through the OMAFRA slides too much as they've already been talked to. OMAFRA's basically got setback distances from 50 to 900 meters. The U.S., they have actually a couple of tools. Minnesota's got one, Nebraska's got one. One's called offset, the other one is OFT. Both models can be used to estimate impacts around livestock, and they will determine setback distances. to our German friend who was here a few minutes ago. The VDI, Association of German Engineers, also published a setback distance document that has got quite a bit of traction in that it's used, being used now in North America for livestock, and they're comparing the US Minnesota tool against this one in certain instances. Primarily it's the developers who find these, and they are finding one that suits them the best so that they can develop more lands. The EPA in South Australia has also developed a guideline, and notice their distances, separation distances vary from about 20 meters to 2,000 meters. Bottom line on setback distances is they're usually used as a guideline for municipal planning. Planning departments should be using this. They, like I mentioned, they can't be applied to existing infrastructure. If it's not built into a regulation, however, if there is no guideline referenced in a regulation, there's often a lot of political pressure applied by development companies to be able to develop lands inside of what these setback distances might have suggested they'd be allowed to do. So that's really up to the municipality to make sure that they have their ducks in a row and they've properly referenced the guidelines so it is admissible. Frequently regulated, odors frequently regulated as an ambient odor concentration, okay? 5 odor units, you're allowed to odor up to 5 odor units, which means you can go up to 105 kilometers an hour, okay? That's over our limit of, you can smell a little bit, you can speed a little bit. So again, these are good for modeling scenarios. They don't, again, preclude loss of enjoyment complaints. And in Canada, well, I don't know, most of us probably from Ontario. I'm not too sure where the population's from, but we have a 1 odor unit threshold in Ontario for industrial 2 reception point. Okay. Other jurisdictions use property line. Quebec uses property line, and they've also got 1 odor unit for 98% of the time, 3 odor units 99, or 5 99.5, and they're running on a 4-minute average versus our 10. So you can see, again, a lot of variability, same idea. You know, how thin are we slicing this coin? I don't really know, but from a broad brush standpoint, it's a similar approach. US, there's many states that have these types of things, but again, they're all subtly different. You could use, say, 7 odor units in the US is a fairly generic bar that many jurisdictions have adopted as an acceptable or nuisance threshold. Again, for certain periods of time, and we'll get into some of the vital factors in a minute. Other examples of ambient odor concentration. Scotland is a 1 to 6 depending on the offensiveness. Okay, so again, a hard number, 1 to 6, depending on subjectivity. So these are best implemented when land use is taken into consideration. 7 odor units in a residential neighborhood for anything more than 1% of the time isn't going to be acceptable. It does provide a level playing field. It makes it easy for industry and people to be able to model to it and say, okay, we're in compliance. Unfortunately, the subjectivity of it on occasion makes this, throws this out the window. Okay, I'm going to briefly talk about vital factors. I think a lot of this has been spoken to already today, but these are how a nuisance or an impact is determined, and this is what, well, when we coach a regulatory agency on how to collect data and define a nuisance, we'll set up a program using a vital factor system, okay? Vital factors are frequency, intensity, duration, offensiveness, and location. Okay, they're all important. They all have different weights depending on where you are and what your jurisdiction is. You can weight certain of these criteria heavier than others. Okay, they're pretty obvious what they mean, but I will briefly elaborate. Intensity is the overall strength of the odor. I have a slide here, and there's lots of slides on intensity. Okay, and you have to determine with your jurisdiction and what data you're collecting. The gentleman earlier this morning had a nice, thank you, had a nice slide on with the guy smiling and the little bit of odor, and then the guy like running away when it stinks. Like, you can pick whatever works for your group. Okay, so they understand how bad is bad. Duration is obvious. How long? Offensiveness is based on the hedonic tone. And then, of course, location is just a residential. So certain geographies and certain communities are much more amenable to certain odors than others. You get into a farming community, west of here or east of here or outside of the city limits, they're going to be more amenable to, manure in the fall and in the spring when they're spreading. Right? You take some kid out of downtown Toronto who's never been west of Bathurst out to a farm, and he's going, holy crow. Right? He's never had that experience, maybe. So it often depends what you're used to. Oop. These are some of the jurisdictions that use vital factors for their regulators that we've talked with. Bottom line on vital factors, the relative impact of an odor on a sensitive receptor can vary greatly. So it's important to attain not only as much information as possible, but as consistent an approach as possible. Fill out the same form every time. If you're going to start adding information to that form, it has to be added either every time or you have a comment section. The forms can't be half filled out one time and the other time. Like, we need a consistent track record to evaluate what the odor is in a specific area from a specific source. So I have a brief summary of some of the odor regs in Canada. It's purely for your reference and interest. I know you don't have much to do tonight. In the States, there's lots of different stuff. 21 states only have general prohibition language. Some of those states back it up with other odor regulations. 15 states have no regulations. Here's some other jurisdictions again for interest's sake. Finally, I'll wrap it up. Regulating odors in communities and regulatory, both sides of this coin need to work together. It has to be a balance. Both sides need to know what they can expect. The economic viability of a business is very important, but so is the enjoyment of someone's residential property and neighborhood. So regulating odors is going to continue to be difficult. There's a lot of people in this room working on super quantitative approaches, and those will always advance and enhance our ability to collect data. But I don't see in our near term how we're going to get away from the qualitative and subjective work that regulates odor. Any questions? That's good. It's like the Yankee game after 6-0, it kind of cleared out. It's good?